Kyle Martinez stood at attention outside the throne room, his back straight and his eyes forward. The crystalline walls of the palace reflected light in 1,000 different colors, creating patterns that danced across the polished floor. It was beautiful, but Kyle had stopped noticing it months ago. Now he just focused on his duty. "The human is on duty again," a deep voice rumbled behind him. Kyle didn't turn around. He knew that voice. It was Commander Zethrak, the leader of the Royal Guard. The commander was a Velkari, like most beings on this planet. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick armor-like skin that covered his entire body. His people were strong, proud, and ancient. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. "Yes, Commander," Kyle replied simply. He kept his eyes on the corridor ahead. "Tell me, human," Zethrak said, walking around to face Kyle. "Why are you here? Your kind is so small, so soft. You have no natural armor, no great strength. One strike from a Velkari could break your bones." The commander wasn't being cruel exactly. He asked this question at least once a week. It seemed to genuinely puzzle him. "I'm here to serve Queen Azara, sir," Kyle said. "Same as you." Zethrak made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We are not the same, human. I was born for this. My ancestors guarded the royal family for 10 generations. You showed up 2 years ago because your government wanted a treaty." Kyle said nothing. There was no point in arguing. The commander was right in a way. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago. They were the newcomers, the weak ones, the strange mammals from a faraway planet that somehow managed to build spaceships despite having no natural advantages. Most species saw humans as curious but ultimately unimportant. The treaty between Earth and the Velkari Empire had required cultural exchange. Someone from Earth had to serve in a position of honor on Meridian Prime. Someone had to prove that humans could stand alongside the great species of the galaxy. Kyle had volunteered for the Royal Guard, even though everyone told him he was crazy. "The human cannot even hold his weapon properly," another guard muttered. This one was Lieutenant Vex, the second in command. He walked past Kyle without looking at him. "I do not understand why the Queen allows this." Kyle tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. He could hold it just fine, thank you very much. He had scored high in all his weapons training. But the Velkari guards used weapons designed for their size and strength. Kyle had to use a modified version, lighter and smaller. To them, it looked like a toy. The doors to the throne room opened. Queen Azara emerged, surrounded by her advisors. She was younger than most rulers, having taken the throne only 5 years ago after her father's death. Unlike the guards, she was more slender, with silver markings across her armor skin that indicated her royal bloodline. Her eyes were intelligent and kind. "Good morning, Kyle," she said, nodding to him as she passed. She was the only one who used his name. "Your Majesty," Kyle said, bowing his head respectfully. "The human gets special attention," Vex muttered to another guard. It is not right. But Kyle had learned something in his 2 years here. Queen Azara treated everyone with respect. She used the names of all her servants, all her advisors, all her guards. She just happened to be the only one who bothered to learn a human name. The day continued as usual. Kyle stood at his post for 6 hours, was relieved for a meal break, then returned for another 6 hours. During his break, he went to the human quarters in the palace. There were only 3 humans on all of Meridian Prime. Kyle was the guard. Amy Cooper was a diplomat who helped with communications between Earth and the Empire. The third was a technician who maintained the human-compatible systems in the palace. "Tough day?" Amy asked as Kyle sat down in their small common room. She was working on her data pad, reviewing some kind of report. "Same as always," Kyle said. He heated up a meal pack from Earth. The Velkari food was nutritious but tasted like cardboard to humans. "Zethrak asked me why I'm here again." Amy smiled. "Did you give him your usual answer?" "Yep, same duty as him." "He'll figure it out eventually," Amy said. "The Velkari respect tradition and honor above everything. You show up, you do your job, you don't complain. That means something to them even if they don't want to admit it." "I hope you're right," Kyle said. "Because I'm getting tired of being treated like a mascot." "You're not a mascot," Amy said firmly. "You're proving that humans belong here, that we can stand with any species in the galaxy. Someone had to be first. I'm glad it's you." Kyle appreciated that. Amy had become his closest friend on this world. She understood what it was like to be surrounded by beings who saw you as inferior, but she also believed in what they were doing. Humanity wasn't going to earn respect by demanding it. They had to show they deserved it. After his meal, Kyle returned to his post. The palace was quieter in the evening. Most of the advisors and officials had gone home. Only the guards remained, protecting the royal family through the night. Kyle took his position outside the Queen's private chambers. This was considered one of the least important posts, which is why they let the human have it. The real threats would be stopped long before they reached this deep into the palace, or so everyone thought. At midnight, the lights in the corridor flickered. Kyle frowned. That never happened. The palace systems were maintained perfectly. Then his communicator chirped. "All guards report." Commander Zethrak's voice came through. He sounded tense. "We have a security alert. Unknown contact in the outer palace." Kyle's heart rate increased. A security alert. In his 2 years here, they had never had a real security alert. Training exercises, yes, but never the real thing. Unknown contact? Vex's voice came through the comm. "What species? What are their weapons?" There was a long pause. "Too long. We don't know," Zethrak said finally. "The sensors detected something moving through the east wing, but we can't identify it. Visual cameras show nothing. Heat sensors show nothing. But motion detectors are triggering. That didn't make sense." Kyle's training kicked in. He checked his rifle, made sure it was fully charged. He scanned the corridor around him. Everything looked normal. "All guards maintain positions," Zethrak ordered. "Palace security teams are investigating." "Stay alert." Kyle stayed alert. Minutes passed. Then his communicator chirped again, but this time it was Amy's personal code. "Kyle, you need to hear this," she said quietly. "I just got access to the palace historical database. I was researching something else and found a file that was flagged. It's about the sensor readings we're getting." "What about them?" Kyle asked, keeping his voice low. "The last time sensors acted like this was 3,000 years ago," Amy said, "during something called the Skalnith invasion." "The what?" "I'm reading about it now. The Skalnith were some kind of enemy species. Bioengineered hunters. The Velkari barely defeated them and thought they were all destroyed." "Kyle, the file says these things are nightmare creatures. They feed on fear. They can turn invisible to most sensors, and they specifically target leaders." Kyle's mouth went dry. "Why would they come back after 3,000 years?" "I don't know," Amy said. "But Kyle, there's something else. The file says the Skalnith have a psychic ability. They can make their prey feel overwhelming terror, the kind of fear that makes you unable to think or fight. The Velkari have a genetic memory of these things. Their ancestors fought them, and that trauma is passed down in their DNA." "That sounds impossible," Kyle said. "Maybe for humans," Amy replied. "But Velkari biology is different. Kyle, if these things are really back, every Velkari in the palace is going to be terrified on an instinctive level. They won't be able to control it." Before Kyle could respond, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a dim red glow. His communicator exploded with voices, guards shouting, reports of movement, and underneath it all a sound Kyle had never heard before. It was a call like an animal hunting. But it wasn't any animal Kyle knew. It was deep and resonant, and even though Kyle had no genetic memory of it, the sound made his skin crawl. All guards converge on the throne room. Zethrak's voice boomed through the comm. "The Queen is in danger." "Move now!" Kyle ran. He left his post and sprinted through the corridors toward the throne room. Other guards were running too, their heavy footsteps echoing off the crystal walls. But as he ran, Kyle noticed something strange. Some of the guards weren't running toward the throne room. They were running away from it. And their faces showed pure terror. When Kyle reached the throne room, he found Commander Zethrak and a dozen guards forming a defensive line. The Queen stood behind them, but something was wrong. She was connected to some kind of machine by cables that ran from her head to a large crystalline device. "What's happening?" Kyle asked. "The Queen began her neural link ceremony an hour ago," Zethrak said. His voice was steady, but Kyle could see his hands shaking. "It's a ritual that connects her mind to the planetary defense network. It takes 6 hours. If we disconnect her early, the feedback will kill her. So we protect her for 6 hours," Kyle said. Zethrak looked at him, and for the first time, Kyle saw real fear in the commander's eyes. "You don't understand, human. They're here. The Skalnith are here, and we cannot fight them." Kyle stared into the shadows at the far end of the throne room. He couldn't see what was making that sound, but he could feel that something was there, something wrong. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he forced himself to stay still. He tightened his grip on his rifle and waited. "What are the Skalneth?" Kyle asked quietly, not taking his eyes off the darkness. Commander Zethrak didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "They are death. They are fear made flesh. They are what my people see when we close our eyes and remember the old times." "I need more than that, sir," Kyle said. "I need to know what we're fighting." Vex, standing nearby, made a choking sound. "We cannot fight them, human. You don't understand. They were created to kill us. Every part of them is designed to hunt Velkari. Our ancestors barely survived them," Kyle's communicator chirped. It was Amy. "Kyle, I'm sending you everything I found about the Skalneth." Reading it now. "They're 8 feet tall, maybe taller. They have adaptive camouflage that makes them nearly invisible, claws that can cut through Velkari armor skin, and the psychic fear ability I mentioned. Kyle, the historical records say that in the last invasion, 90% of the Royal Guard died. They just couldn't fight back. The fear was too strong." Kyle processed this information. 8 feet tall, camouflage, deadly weapons, fear powers. This was bad. But they had modern weapons now. Better technology than 3,000 years ago. That had to count for something. "How many are in the palace?" Kyle asked. "Sensors detected 4 separate contacts," Zethrak said, "but we lost track of them. They could be anywhere now. Why can't we evacuate the Queen?" Kyle asked. "I told you," Zethrak snapped. "The neural link cannot be broken. If we move her, if we disconnect the cables, the feedback will destroy her mind. She will die or become an empty shell. We must hold this position for 6 more hours. 6 hours." Kyle looked at the guards around him. There were 12 Velkari guards, including Zethrak and Vex. They were all trained warriors, all experienced. But every single one of them looked terrified. Some were shaking. Others were breathing too fast, their armor skin flushed with stress colors. "We can do this," Kyle said, trying to sound confident. "We have good positions. Strong weapons. We just need to hold them off." "You don't understand," Vex said again. "The fear. When they come close, the fear is everything. It fills your mind. It drowns your thoughts. You cannot think. You cannot fight. You can only feel terror." "Then we fight through the fear," Kyle said. Several guards looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. But what choice did they have? The palace AI voice suddenly spoke through the speakers. "Warning. Unauthorized life form detected. Corridor 7. Approaching throne room." The guards raised their weapons. Kyle aimed his rifle at the main entrance to the throne room. His heart was pounding. His palms were sweaty, but his hands were steady. Then he saw it. It emerged from the shadows like smoke becoming solid. The Skalneth was tall, just as the file said. Its body was covered in dark, segmented armor that seemed to shift and change, making it hard to focus on. Its head was elongated with too many joints in the neck. Its arms were too long, ending in claws that curved like blades. But worst of all were its eyes. They glowed with a sickly yellow light. And when they focused on Kyle, he felt something push against his mind. Fear. Not normal fear. This was something deeper. Something primal. It tried to dig into his brain and tell him that he was already dead. That there was no point in fighting. That he should run and hide and maybe he would survive a few more minutes. Kyle gritted his teeth and fought it. His finger tightened on the trigger. The Velkari guards started firing first. Plasma bolts lit up the throne room, striking the Skalneth. The creature moved impossibly fast, dodging most of the shots. The few that hit it barely seemed to slow it down. It made that hunting call again, louder this time, and charged forward. 2 guards broke immediately. They threw down their weapons and ran. Just turned and fled through the side exits. Kyle couldn't believe it. These were trained warriors, and they had run away after seeing the enemy for only seconds. The remaining guards kept firing, but Kyle could see their aim was wild. Their hands were shaking too much. The fear was affecting them worse than it affected him. Why? Because they had genetic memories of these things? Because their ancestors had been hunted by Skalneth 3,000 years ago, and that trauma was somehow coded into their DNA? "Focus your fire," Zethrak roared. "Bring it down!" The Skalneth reached the defensive line. It moved like liquid shadow flowing between guards, its claws striking out. One guard screamed and fell, deep cuts across his chest. Another tried to block with his rifle, but the Skalneth tore the weapon from his hands and threw him across the room. Kyle aimed carefully and fired. His shot hit the Skalneth in the shoulder. The creature turned to look at him, those yellow eyes fixing on him with interest. It seemed surprised. Why wasn't he running? Why wasn't he paralyzed with fear like the others? The creature started toward Kyle. Commander Zethrak stepped into its path, his massive frame blocking the way. "You will not touch him," Zethrak growled. He fired his heavy plasma cannon at point-blank range. The blast hit the Skalnath square in the chest and sent it stumbling backward. For a moment, Kyle thought they might actually win. But then the creature straightened up. The armor on its chest was cracked and burned, but underneath Kyle could see the wound already starting to heal. These things had regeneration abilities, too. Of course they did. The Skalnath's eyes glowed brighter. The pressure in Kyle's mind increased. "Run," it seemed to say. "Run or die. This is not your fight. You are prey." But Kyle had made a promise. When he had joined the Royal Guard, he had sworn an oath. To protect the Queen, to hold his position, to do his duty no matter what. Those weren't just words to him. That oath meant something. "Kyle, 3 more contacts approaching." Amy's voice came through his comm. "3 more Skalnath are heading your way. They'll reach the throne room in minutes. 3 more. That meant 4 total. 4 of these nightmare creatures against 12 guards. No, against 10 guards now. 2 had already run, and Kyle could see the others were close to breaking. Vex was backing away slowly, his weapon lowering. Other guards were glancing at the exits, clearly thinking about escape. "We cannot do this," Vex said, his voice hollow. "We cannot fight them. The fear is too strong. My ancestors died screaming, and I can hear their screams in my mind. We have to run. We have to save ourselves." "No," Zethrak said firmly. "We are the Royal Guard. We do not abandon our queen. She is already dead," Vex shouted. "If we stay, we die too." "For nothing." The Skalnath in the room made that hunting call again, and this time it was answered. From the corridors outside, 3 more calls echoed back. The other creatures were coming. 4 more guards broke. They ran for the exits, weapons clattering to the floor. That left only 6 guards now, including Zethrak. 6 guards against 4 Skalnath, and most of those 6 looked like they wanted to run too. Kyle looked at Queen Asara. She was still connected to the neural link device, her eyes closed, completely unaware of the danger. She was defenseless. She had treated him with kindness and respect when no one else had. She had used his name. She had believed that humans deserved to be here. "I'm not running," Kyle said clearly. "I made an oath. I'm keeping it." Zethrak looked at him with an expression Kyle couldn't read. Respect. Disbelief, pity? "Human, you are a fool. But you are a brave fool." "We'll see if bravery is enough," Kyle muttered. The 3 new Skalnath entered the throne room. Now there were 4 of them, spreading out, surrounding the guards. Their yellow eyes glowed in the dim emergency lighting. Their hunting calls filled the air. And the pressure of fear grew stronger and stronger. Kyle felt sweat running down his back. His hands were shaking now. His heart felt like it might explode. But he kept his rifle raised. He kept his position, because that was what he promised to do. One by one, the remaining guards broke. First a young guard whose name Kyle didn't know. Then 2 more. They ran, and Kyle couldn't blame them. The fear was overwhelming. It took everything he had just to stay standing, to not drop his weapon and sprint for safety. Vex was next. The second in command looked at Zethrak with tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Then he ran. That left only Kyle and Commander Zethrak. 2 guards against 4 Skalnath, protecting a queen who couldn't wake up for 5 more hours. "Human," Zethrak said quietly, "I was wrong about you. You should run. Save yourself. One of us should survive to tell what happened here." "No disrespect, Commander," Kyle said, "but I'm not going anywhere." Zethrak made that sound that might have been a laugh. "Then we die together, you and I. At least the Queen will not die alone." The 4 Skalnath began to advance, their claws clicking on the crystal floor. Kyle aimed at the closest one and fired. He would fight until he couldn't fight anymore. He would hold his position until the end, because he was human and humans kept their promises. The 4 Skalnath circled Kyle and Commander Zethrak like predators surrounding wounded prey. Their movements were smooth and deliberate, almost hypnotic. Kyle kept his rifle trained on the nearest one, but his mind was racing. 2 guards against 4 of these things. The math was simple and terrible. "We need to thin their numbers," Zethrak said. His voice was steady, but Kyle could see the commander's entire body was trembling. "Focus fire on one target. Concentrate all our power on a single creature." "Understood." Kyle said. He adjusted his aim to match where Zethrak was pointing his heavy plasma cannon. They both targeted the Skalnith on the left, the one that seemed to be leading the group. Now, Zethrak roared. Both weapons fired simultaneously. The plasma bolts struck the Skalnith in a blaze of light and heat. The creature screamed, a sound that made Kyle's ears ring. It stumbled backward, its armor cracked and burning. For a moment, Kyle thought they had killed it, but then it straightened up again. The wounds were already closing, the armor regenerating. Impossible, Zethrak breathed. We hit it with everything. The other 3 Skalnith rushed forward. Kyle swung his rifle around and fired on automatic, spraying plasma across the throne room. He hit one of them, slowing it down. Zethrak fired his cannon again, the heavy weapon booming in the enclosed space. His shot took another Skalnith in the leg, and it collapsed but started crawling forward immediately. The 4th one reached Zethrak. Its claws swung in a deadly arc. The commander brought up his armored forearm to block, and the claws scraped across his natural armor with a horrible screeching sound. Zethrak grunted in pain and swung his cannon like a club, smashing it into the creature's head. The Skalnith reeled back, giving the commander a moment to fire again. Kyle kept firing, moving backward toward the queen. He had to protect her. That was the mission. Nothing else mattered. His rifle overheated, and he had to wait precious seconds for it to cool. In that time, a Skalnith lunged at him. Kyle threw himself to the side, rolling across the floor. The creature's claws missed him by inches, gouging deep marks in the crystal floor. "Human behind you," Zethrak shouted. Kyle spun around. Another Skalnith had circled behind him. He was trapped between 2 of them. His rifle wasn't ready yet. He did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed one of the fallen guard's weapons, a long shock spear designed for Velkari hands. It was too heavy for him, but he swung it anyway, putting all his strength into it. The spear hit the Skalnith and delivered a massive electrical charge. The creature convulsed and fell. Kyle didn't wait. He dropped the spear, grabbed his rifle, and started firing again. But there were too many of them. They were too fast, too strong, too hard to kill, and the fear was getting worse. Kyle could feel it pressing down on him like a physical weight. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to get away from these things, to save himself while he still could. He looked at Commander Zethrak. The massive Velkari warrior was fighting like a demon, his cannon blazing, his armored fists striking any Skalnith that got close. But tears were streaming down his face. His movements were becoming jerky and uncoordinated. The fear was overwhelming him. "Commander, stay focused," Kyle shouted. "I'm trying," Zethrak said through gritted teeth. "But I can hear them. My ancestors. They're screaming at me to run. Thousands of years of memory, telling me that these things cannot be fought. That to stand against them is to die. Then we die," Kyle shouted back. "But we die doing our duty." One of the Skalnith lunged at Kyle. He fired directly into its open mouth. The creature's head snapped back and it crashed to the floor, dead, unconscious. Kyle didn't know and didn't care. He kept firing at the others. Then he heard Amy's voice in his comm. "Kyle, I've been analyzing the historical files. The Skalnith have a weakness. They're designed to hunt based on fear scent. The more terrified their prey is, the better they can track them. But Kyle, you need to understand something. The Velkari can't fight the fear. It's genetic. It's hardwired into them. But you're human. You don't have that genetic memory. You can resist." "I'm feeling plenty of fear right now," Kyle said, firing another burst. "But you're still fighting," Amy said. "That's the difference. The Velkari can't fight through it, you can. Kyle, you need to make the Skalnith focus on you, not the commander. Draw them away from the queen." Kyle understood what she was saying. If the Skalnith were hunting based on fear, and if Zethrak was giving off more fear than Kyle, they would naturally target the commander first. Kyle needed to make himself the bigger target. "Hey!" Kyle shouted at the top of his lungs. "Over here, you ugly freaks. Come and get me!" The Skalnith turned to look at him. Their yellow eyes locked onto him. Kyle felt the full force of their psychic pressure slam into his mind. It was like being hit by a truck. His vision blurred. His knees almost buckled. The fear was so strong it felt like drowning. But Kyle had grown up in Detroit. He had survived rough neighborhoods, gang violence, and 100 fights. He had joined the military at 18 and served in 3 combat zones on Earth. He had faced death before. This was different, yes. More intense. But fear was fear. And Kyle had learned a long time ago that you could do things even when you were terrified. You just had to decide that something was more important than your fear. Right now, Queen Azara was more important. Kyle started backing away from Zethrak and the Queen, moving toward the side of the throne room. The Skalnath followed him. Good. He had their attention. Human, what are you doing? Zethrak called out. Giving you a chance, Commander. Kyle shouted back. Protect the Queen. I'll handle these things. You can't handle them alone. Watch me! Kyle reached one of the decorative pillars that lined the throne room. He ducked behind it just as a Skalnath lunged at him. The creature's claws struck the pillar instead and cracks spread across the crystal surface. Kyle leaned out and fired, hitting the Skalnath in the side. It barely seemed to notice. 3 of the 4 Skalnath were coming after Kyle now. The 4th was still fighting Zethrak. Kyle could hear the commander's cannon firing, hear his roars of defiance, but he could also hear something else. Zethrak was crying. Actually crying. Tears and sobs mixed with his battle cries. Kyle ran to the next pillar, then the next, leading the Skalnath away from the Queen. He fired when he could, moved when he had to, and somehow stayed alive. His rifle was running low on charge. His body ached from diving and rolling. He had cuts on his arms and legs from near misses, but he was still fighting. Then he heard the sound he had been dreading. A scream of pure terror from Commander Zethrak. Kyle risked a glance back. The commander was standing in front of the Queen, his cannon raised, facing down the 4th Skalnath. But his whole body was shaking violently. His eyes were wide with absolute horror. I can't, Zethrak whispered, though Kyle could somehow hear him clearly in the echoing throne room. I can't do this. Ancestors, forgive me, I can't. Commander, hold your position, Kyle shouted, but it was too late. Zethrak broke. The proud warrior, the leader of the royal guard, the Velkari who had served his queen for 20 years, dropped his weapon and ran. He fled through the side exit, his footsteps echoing away into the distance, and he was crying. Kyle could hear the sobs even as the commander disappeared. Now Kyle was alone. 1 human against 4 Skalnath. 1 small, soft, supposedly weak human, protecting an unconscious queen who couldn't defend herself. The Skalnath seemed to realize this at the same moment. They stopped their advance. Their hunting calls grew louder, more excited. They had cornered their prey. This was the moment they had been bred for. The moment of the kill. Kyle stood up from behind his pillar. His rifle was almost out of charge. He was exhausted. Every part of his body hurt. But he walked back toward the Queen, putting himself between her and the creatures. He raised his rifle even though his arms were shaking with fatigue. Come on then, he said quietly. Let's finish this, the Skalnath charged. All 4 of them, moving faster than Kyle had seen them move before. He fired his rifle until it was completely empty, then threw it at the nearest creature. He grabbed a fallen guard's shock spear and thrust it forward. He managed to stab 1 Skalnath, but another knocked the spear from his hands. Kyle pulled out his combat knife, the small blade laughably inadequate against these monsters. But it was all he had left. He slashed at a claw that came too close, actually managed to cut into it. The Skalnath pulled back, surprised that this tiny prey was still fighting. Is that all you got? Kyle shouted. He was beyond fear now. He was just angry. Angry that these things existed. Angry that they were trying to hurt someone under his protection. Angry that everyone else had run, leaving him alone. The Skalnath circled him. They seemed confused. Their fear sense told them he should be paralyzed by terror. But here he was, still fighting with a knife against impossible odds. It didn't make sense to their hunting instincts. One of them made a decision. It lunged forward, claws extended. Kyle knew he couldn't dodge. This was it. This was the end, but he had done his duty. He had kept his oath. He had stood his ground when everyone else fled. If he died here, at least he died knowing he hadn't abandoned the Queen. The claws came down. Kyle raised his knife, determined to take at least. The Skalnath's claws came down in a blur. Kyle twisted his body at the last second. The claws missed his head but raked across his shoulder, tearing through his uniform and into his flesh. Pain exploded through him. He fell backward, hitting the floor hard. His knife skittered away across the crystal surface. Blood ran down his arm. The Skalnath loomed over him, ready to strike again. Kyle rolled desperately to the side. The creature's claws struck where his head had been a moment before, cracking the floor. Kyle kept rolling, got to his feet, stumbled, nearly fell again. "Kyle, get up!" Amy's voice screamed in his calm. "The palace AI is trying to help. It's closing blast doors to slow them down, but you need to move. Kyle ran, not away from the queen but around her, using the neural link device as cover. The Skalneth followed him. He could hear their claws clicking on the floor, their hunting calls echoing. He was bleeding badly. His shoulder felt like it was on fire. He was going to pass out soon if he didn't stop the bleeding. But first he had to survive the next 30 seconds. Kyle's boot hit something. He looked down and saw a fallen guard's weapon. Not a rifle, but something else. A ceremonial sword, decorative but sharp. The Velkari guards carried them as symbols of their oath. Kyle grabbed it with his good hand. The blade was heavy, designed for someone twice his size and strength. But it was better than nothing. A Skalneth appeared in front of him. Kyle swung the sword with all his remaining strength. The blade connected with the creature's arm, cutting deep. Black blood sprayed. The Skalneth screamed and stumbled back. The wound started healing immediately, but at least Kyle had heard it. That's right, Kyle gasped. I can hurt you. Come on. Another Skalneth came from his left. Kyle barely got the sword up in time to block its claws. The impact sent shocks of pain through his injured shoulder. He cried out but held on to the sword. He pushed back, using the creature's own force against it, and managed to create some space. His mind was racing. He couldn't win this fight through strength. He wasn't strong enough. But Amy had said something important. The Skalneth hunted based on fear scent. They tracked their prey by sensing terror. And right now Kyle was bleeding. His blood was everywhere. That had to interfere with their tracking somehow, right? An idea formed. It was crazy. It was desperate. But Kyle was out of options. He switched the sword to his injured arm, biting back a scream as the damaged muscles protested. Then he took his combat knife from his belt with his good hand. Before he could think too hard about it, he cut his own palm. Blood welled up and dripped to the floor. What are you doing? Amy's voice was panicked. Kyle, you're losing too much blood already. I'm making a trail, Kyle said through gritted teeth. He started moving backward toward the queen, letting his blood drip as he went. They hunt by fear, right? And by scent. If my blood is between them and the queen, maybe they'll focus on me instead of her. That's insane. Got any better ideas? The Skalneth were definitely interested now. They approached more slowly, their yellow eyes fixed on Kyle. He backed up until he was standing directly in front of the unconscious queen. His blood formed a barrier between her and the creatures, a wet red line that said, "You want her? You have to go through me first." Kyle raised the sword in one hand and the knife in the other. His vision was blurring from blood loss. His legs felt weak, but he stood firm. He had promised to protect her. He was keeping that promise. All four Skalneth converged on him. Kyle fought like a man possessed. He blocked one set of claws with the sword, stabbed at another creature with the knife. He ducked under a strike that would have taken his head off. He kicked one Skalneth in what he hoped was somewhere sensitive. He even headbutted one, though it hurt him more than the creature. He was fighting on pure instinct now. Every bit of combat training he had ever received, every street fight he had survived, every moment of his life that had prepared him for violence, it all came together in this moment. He wasn't thinking. He was just reacting, moving, fighting, but he was losing. He knew it. The Skalneth were landing more hits than he was. He had cuts all over his body now. His uniform was in tatters. The sword felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His knife was slippery with blood, both his and theirs. Then one of the Skalneth got past his guard. Its claws sank into his side. Kyle screamed. The creature lifted him off the ground, its claws deep in his flesh. Kyle could feel his ribs cracking. This was it. This was really the end. But then Kyle remembered something. Something Amy had said earlier. The Skalneth were bioengineered to hunt Velkari. Their claws, their strength, their fear power, all of it was designed specifically for one species. But Kyle wasn't Velkari. He was human, and humans were different. Humans were smaller, more flexible. And sometimes being small was an advantage. Kyle didn't try to fight the Skalneth's grip. Instead, he went limp, letting his weight pull him down. The creature's claws tore through flesh, but Kyle slipped free. He fell to the ground in a heap, gasping in pain. But he was free. The Skalneth bent down to grab him again. Kyle waited until it was close, then drove his knife up into its throat. The creature reared back, black blood gushing. Kyle didn't stop. He grabbed the sword and swung it with both hands, ignoring the agony in his shoulder and side. The blade caught the Skalneth across the neck. The cut wasn't clean, but it was deep enough. The creature collapsed, finally dead, one down, 3 to go. Kyle tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He was on his knees now, sword held loosely in his grip. The remaining 3 Skalneth circled him. They knew he was finished. They could take their time. "Kyle, the AI says there's a weapons locker near you," Amy said urgently. "Behind the Queen's throne. If you can reach it, there are explosives inside." Emergency defense supplies, Kyle looked. The throne was maybe 20 feet away. It might as well have been 20 miles. He couldn't even stand, but he could crawl. Kyle started dragging himself across the floor. The Skalneth watched him, almost curious. This prey was so determined to survive, so stubborn. It fascinated them in some way. They followed him slowly, in no rush. Kyle reached the throne. Behind it, he found a panel in the wall. He slapped the access button with his bloody hand. The panel slid open, revealing racks of weapons and equipment, including several thermal charges powerful enough to bring down a building. An idea formed in his pain-fogged mind. "A terrible, desperate idea. Amy," he said quietly, "how long until the Queen's ceremony is finished?" 2 hours and 17 minutes. Why? "I need you to tell the Palace AI something. Tell it to seal the throne room. All exits. Complete lockdown." "What?" "Kyle, that will trap you in there with those things." "That's the idea," Kyle said. He grabbed 3 thermal charges and started activating them. "If I can't beat them, I'll slow them down. I'll make every second cost them. Even if I die, I'll buy time for the Queen." "Kyle, no. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Kyle said simply. He set the charges around the room, placing them at structural weak points. He set the timers but didn't activate them yet. They were his last resort. "Seal the room, Amy. Do it now." He heard her crying on the other end. "You're the bravest person I've ever known." "I'm just keeping my promise," Kyle said. "Seal the room." Heavy blast doors slammed down over all the exits. The throne room was now a sealed box. Kyle and the 3 Skalneth were locked in together, with an unconscious Queen who had 2 hours before she woke up. 2 hours that Kyle had to survive or at least delay the creatures. Kyle stood up, using the throne for support. His body was a mess of wounds. He could barely see straight, but he raised his sword and faced the Skalneth. 2 hours, he said to them. "You want the Queen? You've got 2 hours to get through me. Let's see if you're up for it," the Skalneth charged. Kyle met them head-on. He fought and bled and screamed and refused to give up. He used every trick he knew, every dirty tactic, every moment of surprise he could create. When the sword broke, he used the pieces. When his knife was knocked away, he used his fists. When he couldn't stand, he fought from the ground. He overturned defensive barriers to create cover. He smashed crystal pillars to make them fall on the Skalneth. He even grabbed one of the ceremonial banners and threw it over a creature's head, blinding it long enough to stab it in the side. Minutes passed like hours. Kyle lost track of time. He was running on nothing but will now. His body should have given up long ago. But every time he fell, every time he thought he couldn't get back up, he remembered why he was here. He remembered Queen Azara's kindness. He remembered his oath. He remembered that he was human and humans didn't quit. One of the Skalneth went down. Kyle had managed to activate one of the thermal charges and throw it at the creature. The explosion had blown off its legs. It was regenerating, but slowly. That was 2 down, effectively. 2.5 more to go. Kyle backed up against a wall. He had nowhere left to run. The 2 remaining Skalneth approached. They were moving slower now, too. Kyle had hurt them over and over. They were healing, but even their regeneration had limits. They were tired of this stubborn prey that refused to die. Kyle grinned through bloody teeth. "What's wrong?" "Getting tired. I can do this all day." That was a lie. He probably had minutes left at most. But they didn't need to know that. The explosion lit up the throne room like a small sun. The force of it threw Kyle backward. He felt the Skalneth's claws tear out of his body as the blast separated them. He hit the floor hard, bounced and rolled. Everything was pain and fire and noise. Then silence. Kyle opened his eyes. At least he tried to. One eye was swollen shut. The other was blurry with blood. He was lying on his back, staring up at the crystal ceiling. Parts of it were cracked now. The explosion had damaged the throne room badly. Smoke filled the air. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through every part of his body. He could feel broken bones grinding against each other. His breathing was shallow and wet, probably a punctured lung. He couldn't feel his left arm at all. That was probably bad, but he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. Kyle turned his head slowly, looking for the Skalneth. Through the smoke, he could see parts of them. Pieces. The explosion at close range had torn them apart. One was definitely dead, its body in pieces too small to regenerate from. The other was badly damaged, missing most of its torso. As Kyle watched, it twitched weakly, trying to pull itself together. But it was too damaged. It would take hours for it to heal enough to be a threat again, if it could heal at all. The third Skalneth, the one whose legs had been blown off earlier, was also down. It had been caught in the edge of the blast. Its regeneration seemed to have stopped completely. Kyle had done it. He had actually done it. 4 Skalneth, and he had taken them all down. Maybe not permanently, but enough. Enough to protect the queen until her ceremony finished. Kyle. Amy's voice in his comm sounded frantic. Kyle, are you there? The explosion registered on all our sensors. Kyle, please answer me. Kyle tried to speak, but only a wet cough came out. He tried again. Still here, he whispered. His voice was barely audible even to himself. Oh, thank God, Amy said, and he could hear her crying with relief. Medical teams are standing by outside the blast doors. The moment the Queen's ceremony finishes, they'll come in. Just hold on, Kyle. Just hold on a little longer. How long? Kyle asked. 1 hour and 12 minutes. Can you make it? Kyle laughed, which hurt terribly. Made it this far, didn't I? He lay there on the cold floor, trying to breathe, trying to stay conscious. Every breath hurt. Every heartbeat hurt. He was pretty sure he was dying. He had lost too much blood. His body had taken too much damage. Even with immediate medical attention, his chances weren't good, and he had over an hour to wait, but that was okay. He had done his job. The Queen was safe. That was what mattered. Kyle's mind wandered as he lay there. He thought about his childhood in Detroit. His mother, who had worked 2 jobs to support him. His time in the military learning to be a soldier. The day he had volunteered for the Royal Guard, despite everyone telling him he was crazy. The past 2 years on this alien world, being mocked and dismissed by everyone except one person, Queen Azara. She had believed in him when no one else did. She had treated him like he mattered, and now he had repaid that kindness. He had stood his ground when all her other guards had fled. He had kept his oath. That was worth dying for. Time passed strangely. Kyle drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he opened his eyes and the throne room looked normal. Sometimes it was filled with strange lights and shadows. Once he thought he saw Commander Zethrak standing over him, but when he blinked, no one was there. Kyle, stay awake, Amy kept saying in his comm. Talk to me. Tell me something. Anything. Did I ever tell you, Kyle whispered, about the time I punched my drill sergeant? No, Amy said, and he could hear the smile in her voice even though she was crying. Tell me about it, so Kyle told her. And then he told her other stories. About his first combat mission on Earth. About the time he got lost in downtown Detroit and had to find his way home without any money. About his favorite restaurant back home and how much he missed real hamburgers. Amy kept him talking. Kept him conscious. Kept him alive. Finally, after what felt like years, the neural link device made a soft chiming sound. Kyle heard cables disconnecting. Queen Azara gasped, her eyes opening. The ceremony was complete. The blast doors immediately began opening. Medical teams rushed in along with palace guards. Kyle heard shouting, running footsteps, the whine of medical scanners. Someone rolled him onto a stretcher. He screamed as his broken ribs shifted. This human should be dead, he heard someone say. These wounds are impossible. How is he still alive? Because he's stubborn, Amy's voice said. She was there now, holding his hand. That's what humans do. We're too stubborn to die when we've still got a job to finish. Kyle saw Queen Azara's face appear above him. She looked shocked, her eyes wide as she took in his injuries. Kyle, she said softly. What did you do? My duty, Your Majesty, Kyle whispered. Like I promised. Then darkness took him. Kyle woke up 3 weeks later in a medical facility. His entire body was wrapped in regeneration bandages, the advanced Velkari medical technology slowly repairing his damaged tissues. He couldn't move, but he could see and hear. Amy was sitting next to his bed reading something on her data pad. When she noticed his eyes were open, she smiled. Welcome back, hero. Hero? Kyle's voice was hoarse. What are you talking about? You really don't know? Amy said. Kyle, you're famous. What you did in that throne room spread across the entire empire. The only guard who didn't run. The human who stood alone against 4 Skalneth and won. They're calling you the Queen's Shield. Kyle processed this slowly. Where's Commander Zethrak? Amy's smile faded. He resigned. All the guards who ran did. They couldn't handle the shame. But Kyle, you need to understand something. What they felt wasn't normal fear. The Skalneth's psychic power was specifically designed to exploit Velkari biology. It triggered genetic memories of trauma going back thousands of years. They literally couldn't fight it. What you did wasn't normal. It was impossible. Didn't feel impossible, Kyle said. Just felt necessary. Over the following weeks, as Kyle healed, he received visitors. Military commanders who wanted to understand how he had survived. Scientists who wanted to study human psychology. Reporters who wanted to hear his story. Kyle was polite but brief with all of them. He didn't see what the big deal was. He had done his job. That was all. Queen Isara visited him often. She would sit by his bed and talk to him about the Empire, about politics, about anything except what had happened. Kyle appreciated that. He didn't want to relive that night in the throne room. The nightmares were bad enough. Finally, after 6 weeks, Kyle was healed enough to walk. His body had scars now, dozens of them marking where the Skalneth had nearly killed him. The doctors said the scars would fade eventually. Kyle didn't mind them. They reminded him that he had survived. On his first day out of the medical facility, Queen Isara summoned him to the throne room. Kyle walked there slowly, still getting used to moving again. When he entered, he found the room had been repaired. All signs of the battle were gone, but Kyle could still see it in his mind. The blood, the bodies, the fear. The throne room was filled with people. Velkari officials, military officers, diplomats from a dozen worlds, all standing in formal rows. Kyle felt uncomfortable with so many eyes on him. Queen Isara stood from her throne as Kyle approached. Kyle Martinez, she said in a voice that carried through the chamber. You served in my royal guard for 2 years. In that time, you were mocked and dismissed by many. They said humans were too weak, too soft, too emotional to stand with the great species of the galaxy. Kyle said nothing. Where was this going? On the night of my neural link ceremony, the Queen continued. 4 Skalneth infiltrated this palace. Ancient horrors that my people thought destroyed forever. Every guard assigned to protect me fled in terror. Every guard except one. You remained, Kyle Martinez. You stood your ground against impossible odds. You fought creatures designed to kill. Creatures that fed on fear itself. And you won. The Queen stepped down from her throne and approached Kyle. She was holding something, a piece of armor, silver and gleaming. In our history, Queen Isara said, there has only been one position higher than Commander of the Royal Guard. It is called the First Shield. The one guard who stands closest to the throne. The one guard who will never retreat, never surrender, never abandon their post. For 300 years this position has been empty. No one was deemed worthy of it. She held out the armor to Kyle. I name you First Shield, Kyle Martinez, not as a symbolic gesture, not as a reward, but because you have proven, beyond any doubt, that you are what every guard swears to be but what few truly are. You are loyal unto death. You are courage made flesh. You are the shield that will not break. Kyle took the armor with shaking hands. It was lighter than it looked, designed specifically for him, human-sized, human-made, but bearing the royal crest of the Velkari Empire. I don't deserve this, Kyle said quietly. You deserve it more than anyone, Queen Isara said. You stood when others ran. You fought when others fled. You kept your oath when others broke theirs. That is what it means to be the First Shield. The assembled crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then louder. Kyle looked around at all these aliens, these proud and ancient beings clapping for a human. For him, Amy was in the crowd, tears streaming down her face, grinning proudly.